across the street from the library here. And maybe you guys have seen my Bundy for Governor sign that I've had out there. Anyway, I'm from Colorado originally. I moved to Idaho in 2015 because of the situation in Colorado, and you and I were chatting about that earlier. You spent some time in Fort Carson where I grew up, and I saw Colorado turn from a state that used to be like Idaho to a place that looks a lot more like California. And that bothered me deeply. And I had an opportunity to move here when my daughter graduated from high school and went off to start her life, and I took it. And became aware of Ammon Bundy actually just prior to coming to Idaho in 2014 when he was involved in struggles with his family and the federal government in Nevada. And I was very much in the process of planning my escape from Colorado at that time, and I was very inspired by what was going on down there. And then again, shortly after I moved to Idaho, I was inspired again by this man and what he did when he went to the aid of the Hammond family in Oregon. So anyway, it's my great pleasure to introduce Ammon Bundy. Please consider what he has to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to adjust this a little bit. I'm going to turn it up too a little bit.
That one, yep.
Oh, thank you, Wendy. Can you hear me okay back there now? All right. Well, you don't have to be so far back there. I know the room's kind of narrow, but if you want to come up, you can come up. Because I hope to have a conversation. I hope to be able to have a discussion here about the things that are happening in Idaho, and the reality of where we're at, and also the opportunity that we have to do a lot of good here in Idaho. So anyway, I didn't get any takers on coming up, and I get that. But what's that? All right. Well, I'll start off by telling a little about myself. I grew up in southern Nevada on a ranch. It's a desert ranch. It's a lot different than here. My dad runs about 600 to 700 head of cattle on the desert. And kind of give you a little bit of perspective, I don't know what the ratio of cows per acre, whatever it is up here, but it's probably, maybe even 1 cow per acre or 2 cows per acre. Anybody rancher here that actually runs cattle on land in this area?
It's 1 per acre.
1 per acre, so 1 cow per acre. And if you have a really good year, if you irrigate it and fertilize, you might get a little bit more, but that's the average. Well, in Nevada, where my dad runs cattle, it's 100 acres per cow. So it takes 100 acres to have enough food for one cow. And so it takes really a couple hundred head of cattle before you can actually even make a living, and that's when you have your cattle in the fields. So down there, it takes so much effort to gather them because they're scattered in such a large area that it even takes more cattle to make a living for just one family. And so my dad runs several hundred head of cattle over a large area. And my family moved into that area in 1877. It was, Nevada had been a state for 13 years. And so it was back when pretty much everybody didn't want to be in Nevada. And in fact, when they made, it's an interesting fact, when they enabled Nevada into the Union, they actually lied about how many people were in Nevada, because the standard was about 40,000 people needed to be in the state. And so when you go through the census, and I had to do this with my family and defending our, everything that happened in the courts and so forth. So I went through the census. When you go through the census, you see that they claimed that there was like almost 40,000 people in 1864. That's when the state was enabled into the Union during the Civil War. And then the next year, I think it's the next year after that, it drops down to almost 20,000. So I think they actually got an accurate. So maybe this voter fraud stuff has been going on for a long, long time, right? Anyhow, I just want you to understand a little bit of my background, who I am. I'm here today to talk to you and hopefully gain your confidence so that you'll vote for me and so that you'll support my campaign, so that you'll donate to my campaign, so you'll talk to your friends, so you'll get gear and a sign and all of these things and start this movement of actually keeping Idaho, Idaho. And so that's why I'm here. But I don't expect you to do that just because of I stand in front of you and say a few things, or maybe because you read an article in the newspaper, or maybe even because your friend said something about it. So I'm here to convince you. And I want you to know who I am, where I came from, and what it is I've been doing since I pretty much left the ranch. And so give you a little bit more background about how I grew up. When my family came into that area in 1877, and no one else wanted it. No one else had claimed it. I think even the Native Americans had abandoned the area. And in fact, the first people that came into that area were just, less than a decade prior, and they were sent down there from Brigham Young, from Salt Lake, and they came back to Brigham Young and said that the place was uninhabitable, that it was too dry and too arid for anybody to live, and it was hot. They made it through one summer. And so we always tease that that Brigham Young went and looked, and he was looking for the most stubborn, hard-headed, obstinate people that he could find, and he found my family, and then he sent us down there, and we've been there ever since. And we leveled the fields in the Virgin Valley and diverted the Virgin River and created a beautiful, productive valley out of that, much like all these valleys that are around here. And then my family also found springs up on the mountains. And they were just like, some of them were running, but most of them were more like a wet spot on the ground, and they would just dig down and they'd capture that water. And they would create a water head and then put it into a trough. And then now the cattle can water around there and use the feed up on the foothills of the mountain. Well, there was a lot more desert, but you couldn't use it unless you could get water to it. So in my grandfather's and my father's time, they began to divert those waters all throughout the desert there, and they've got about a 30-mile span of where they have water and water trough. And you imagine what that's done for the desert. It has literally made it so the desert is full of wildlife, where there's great places to camp, and people like to hunt, and there's deer and coyotes and rabbits and desert tortoise, and there's all kinds of things because of those waters. And my family has maintained those waters for multiple generations. And in fact, our rights to graze on the grazing rights are deeded, and they're connected to what they call livestock watering rights. And so that's how I grew up. And I grew up on the range, all the time out there, riding four-wheelers or horses, working the cattle, bouncing around in the back of a pickup. That's how I grew up. And it was kind of a tough, growing up, but as far as like work and so forth, but it became something that was just normal to me. Working a long day was just normal. In fact, I didn't know that it could be so easy. I don't work near as that hard now. And so that's how I grew up. And I enjoyed it. I love the way I grew up and it also gave me a perspective on liberty and freedom, of being free. And so I want to ask you a question. And then I'll talk a little bit more about what I did after I left the ranch. So, what is freedom? What is freedom? If you can give me a definition, I'm curious to what your definition of freedom is. What is it?
To live.
Okay, to live. What do you mean to live?
To be free to live.
Okay, it's pretty good. To live.
To live.
Okay. Okay. I think you're getting pretty close there. What else? Have you thought about it? I mean, we sing about it, right? We celebrate 4th of July. We have flags flying. We look at a flag, and American flag, and it means something to us, right? But what is it? What is freedom? And I would like to, anybody else, any other takers want to give it a shot?
Living without oppression.
Okay, living without oppression. I think those are all accurate. So I'm going to define what I believe freedom is in words, and it's pretty much what everybody else has said here, but it is the ability to live however and do whatever you want, as long as you're not infringing upon somebody else's right.
Amen.
Okay? Think about that. It is the ability to do whatever you want, as long as you are not infringing upon somebody else's right. So let's apply that. What freedom of religion. It's the ability to worship whatever you want, however you want, when you want, as long as you're not infringing upon somebody else's rights, right?
See?
What about freedom of speech? It's to be able to say whatever you want. You can say it how you want. You can even get in someone's face and say it as loud as you want, as long as you don't infringe upon somebody's rights. And I've heard to say that, your right ends when, how do they say it? There's something about, your right.
It's my rights don't end where your feelings begin.
Yeah, well, there's something about a fist in there too. I can't remember. Basically, it ends with my fist, and that's right. Like as long as you're not infringing upon somebody else's rights. Well, think about it also with property. What is freedom of private property? Isn't it to do whatever you want on your property as long as you don't infringe upon somebody else's right?
See?
So do you see how we've lost freedom on our property?
Yeah.
Right? And I could keep going and talking about, because you need to give it the test, right? Are we free? And what is freedom? And so whenever something happens, like, you have to ask, are we free? And I would like to propose here in a little bit and talking about Idaho, as far as Idaho being free. But first of all, I'll let you think about freedom a little bit. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what happened and why I'm not on the Bundy Ranch anymore, right? I'm up here in Idaho. I've been up here for 7 years. I moved from Arizona, and I live in Emmett. And we moved there in 2015, and I love Emmett. My boys and I got a beautiful wife, Lisa, and I got 6 kids. My oldest is 19. She just got married a little over a month ago, and they moved to Moscow. And I learned you can't say Moscow or they get offended, right? It's Moscow. And I hope they can endure through the liberalism there, because there's some wokeness going on there. And but I think they'll be okay. And then I have my youngest, who's actually out in the RV right now. He's 6 years old, and I've got 6 children, 3 boys, 3 girls. And I'm very, very blessed to live in Emmett. My older boys, they play football. And right now, kind of a fun story is right now they were last year, well, 3 years ago, they were thrown into the 4A, the conference 4A. They went from 3A to 4A, right? And they were the second smallest school in the league, and they were ranked at the bottom. And the first year they struggled. The first year, and the second year they were ranked at the bottom, and they come out fighting, and they had worked hard all year long. The coach said, well, if we're going to win in the 4A, we're going to have to have the best endurance and be strong, and because they were really small and complete underdogs, right? So they came out fighting, and they ended up being number 1 in the conference. They had number 1 in the conference, and then they be undefeated through the playoffs, and they went to state, and they were half of them were sick because I don't know if they got COVID or whatever. They didn't tell anybody, right? They just kept it a secret. And you can't be sick now, right? If you tell anybody you're sick, then all of a sudden they think you're going to kill them. So they didn't tell anybody. They go and they lose it state, okay? And then now this year, last year 27 seniors graduated. And anybody who's been in football or whatever, which I really enjoy watching my boys play football. But if you lose 27 seniors, they're usually all your starters, and so the next year you're usually not that good, right? And so everybody thought, Emmett's a small team. They just had like a really good shot, and all the stars lined up. And so this year they're going to be terrible, and they ranked them at number 3 in the conference. And then 4 schools scheduled their homecoming with Emmett. And that's like an insult, right? Because that means you're going to be terrible, and they want to make sure they win their homecoming, right? And so they scheduled Emmett football, the Huskies, Emmett Huskies, for 4 homecoming contests. And one by one, Emmett went and spoiled their homecomings because they're undefeated in the conference, right? So they're like these underdogs, and I love it because they're small team, and they're always underestimated, and they're always ranked at the bottom, and they always have a hill to climb, and they always seem like they're willing to do it. And the coach is this Irish guy, and I tease him because he's about 4'5", and that's an exaggeration. And he's just a firecracker, and he motivates those boys to work hard, and they would do almost anything for him. And he's a great leader, and so that's been fun. And so now, if they win one more game this year, they'll be undefeated in the conference and go into the playoffs. So I love living in Emmett, right? Now, how did I get there? Well, when I was about 15 years old, my father came to me and basically said, Ammon, the ranch isn't big enough for the both of us. And I have a whole bunch of brothers and sisters. And so, he was serious about it. It wasn't because we were fighting, although once in a while we definitely had our knockdown drag-outs, but that's the way it kind of was on the ranch. And but he was just warning me and out of love letting me know that the ranch is not big enough to produce a living for more than a couple families. And me being in the middle, I'm most likely going to have to go off and make a living some other way. And so I ended up leaving the ranch. I served a mission in Minnesota for a couple years and taught people about the gospel of Jesus Christ. And then I came home, and I went to Southern Utah University. Went to a little university there and started a fleet maintenance business where I managed and maintained commercial trucks. And there wasn't very many commercial trucks in Cedar City. It was just a little town. And so I was just making it, and I was like, why don't I move to a little bit bigger metropolitan area, but where there was more fleets and so forth, or at least close to one. But I felt like I was needing to wait there. And ultimately, I was there for several years because I was waiting for somebody. And she finally came along, my wife, and I married her. And then just a few months later, we moved down to Arizona, south of Phoenix. And I took my business down there and began building it up and run it for 21 years. And ended up being one of the largest fleet maintenance companies in Arizona. I started when I was 21 years old, and I built it up for 21 years, and then I ended up selling that business. But before I sold it, about 16, 17, 18 years into business, I'd been looking for software to help run my business. And there was pieces of it, like a financial software. There was some like service order software where I can print service orders. Then we had all this paper, and they were in envelopes. And then I had a huge office staff just processing all the paperwork. And I had another piece of software that was tracking the maintenance, so all the services and so forth. And I was like, man, this is such a mess. We have a really great process. We've developed a process that works. And, there's no software that makes it so that we can put it all together. So what do we do in the United States of America? If we don't have something, right, we make it. Why? Because we're free to do it. We're supposed to be free to do whatever we want as long as we don't infringe upon our neighbors. And there was no infringing upon our neighbors to build a software, right? And so I decided to build my own. And I put a team together, got a developer and a project manager, and we put our team together, and it took us 3.5 years. And we developed this really awesome software, and we were able to test it in our shop. My customers were guinea pigs, the parts vendors were guinea pigs, and they all knew what I was doing, and they all worked with me. I had really good relationships with them, right? They were more than happy to give me their feedback, to use it, and then give me their feedback, and we made it this really awesome software. My technicians were able to give me feedback, and subcontractors and my office staff, until we got it just fine-tuned where it was really awesome. And it made a huge difference in our software, or in our shop. So then I thought, well, we have this great software. Why don't we start selling it to other shops? So we started selling to other shops, and now it's one of the leading fleet maintenance shop management softwares in North America. And since then, I actually have sold that business as well. I sold that as well. So, and I bought some commercial properties in Emmett and around, and that's primarily what I do. So again, why do I tell you? Because you probably didn't know that I have built from scratch multiple multi-million-dollar businesses, that I have hired hundreds of people, dealt with budgets of millions of dollars a year, and united people in a direction at multiple times, where we actually built something together with a large amount of people, built something together that became very valuable for other people, even in the sense of being able to sell it. And so, those skills are going to be needed as governor. That's just the way it is, right? And I'm here, what am I here for? I'm here to convince you that I could be a good governor. Well, if all the experience I had was in the desert and the ranch, maybe I wouldn't be a good governor. And so you need to understand that. I want you to understand that I have business. I built multiple businesses. I've dealt with millions of dollars of budgets. I've worked with people in ways that were very detailed and took a lot of effort to get people to unify and to go one direction, which is what our state needs, right? We need to be going into one direction. Now let's talk about liberty. So I've laid a little bit who I am. Let's talk a little bit more about liberty. Who could tell me the first state in the Union who arrested somebody for going to church? Who could tell me what state that was? You guys are quiet. You got to wake up. What's that? You said Idaho. Anybody else?
California.
What's that?
Yeah.
California. Okay, who else? What else? Anybody else? Utah. Anybody else? Anybody remember the news? Okay. It was Idaho.
Was it?
Idaho. What's the Bill of Rights, right? They're found in the first 10 amendments of the Constitution. What's the very first line of the Bill of Rights? Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. So it was the very first thing that our founders put in the very first Bill of Rights. And they refused to sign the Constitution and ratify it unless this was in there. So the right to worship, how, when, and where, the freedom, was most important to them. In the Idaho Constitution, Article 1, Section 4, get it here, says, hang on, I gotta get, it's titled Guarantee of Religious Liberty. This is the Idaho Constitution, Article 1, Section 4. So they listed it as one of the top priorities, right? The first one, Section 1, is an unalienable rights of man, which is the right to worship, right? Section 2 is the political powers inherent in the people. Section 3, state inseparable part of a union. And Section 4, guarantee of religious liberties. And then it says, the exercise and enjoyment of religious faith and worship shall forever be guaranteed. That's Idaho. Okay, so pretty clear of what the law is. Remember, this is the law. The state statutes and codes are not the law. Those are putting forth the law, and we could talk about that in more detail. This is the law. This is what the people give the government to regulate them, to say, we authorize you to do these things, and the Bill of Rights are things that are expressly either granted or not granted to the government. So you could see here that the right to worship is pretty important, right? And yet Idaho was what? Was the first state in the Union to arrest somebody for going to church. That happened in Moscow, Idaho, right? Do you remember that? Remember that? And so now, let's go to what state was the first to arrest a mother for taking her children to the park? Idaho. What state was one of the first, I haven't confirmed if it was the first, but it was one of the first to raid a business for not locking down when the governor told them to, or not shutting their doors when the governor told them to? Ketchum, Idaho, right? And so, do we see this? See what's happening? And is that what Idaho is about? I'm going to move over just a little bit. Is that what Idaho is about?
Idaho's about freedom.
Is it? I think it is.
so.
I think it is too. I think it's been about freedom. I think the people of Idaho are about freedom. I've traveled all over the state now. We've been around the state twice, and this is now the beginning of a third time. That RV, I've put 10,000 miles on it since I got it. Just shy of 10, about by the time I get home, it'll be over 10,000 miles. And I've talked to groups just like this, and I do not believe that Idaho, or the people of Idaho, are anything but about freedom. I believe that we're some of the most freedom and liberty-minded people that are in the world, and I'm certain of that. But then, how do we end up with a situation where our government, those in our government, are actually arresting people for going to church? How do we end up in that situation? Is it because maybe we've not made sure that the right people are in office? Have we got complacent because things are so good? I mean, you can't have a more beautiful little town than this. I've driven through a couple times now. I drove through last night. I mean, you can't have a much more beautiful place to live than right here, Spirit Lake, Idaho. And it's probably pretty easy to say, look, life is okay. My neighbors are great people. My community is good. Yeah, there's always going to be some issues, some problems. But it's pretty easy to be complacent in Idaho because it is such a good place to live. But that's also where corruption, where cronyism, if you will, where abuses start to happen. Because why? Why?
We're not paying attention.
Because the people aren't checking. They're not saying, wait a minute here. Right? And then all of a sudden, if that builds and builds and builds and becomes this kind of this monster behind the closet, well, all of a sudden, that monster kicks open the door and starts to affect everybody else. And that's what's going to happen in Idaho. That is what's going to happen in Idaho. That's what happened in 2020. But that's not the end of it, I can tell you that. And because we are liberty-minded here in Idaho, we can unite. We can unite and we could stop it. Not only stop it, we could put a complete end to it, and then we can become an example and push back on this world tyranny. Push back. The world needs an example. It needs an example of how to live free. What's that? To be able to do whatever you want to do as long as you do not infringe upon your neighbor's right or on somebody else's right. Right?
Amen.
And what is the purpose of government?
To protect the rights of the people.
Protect the rights of the people? Is that really the purpose of government? Are you sure?
Well, supposed to.
Anybody want to disagree with that? I thought the purpose of government is to take the money from the people and then give it to who they say is the poor.
Oh, so is that what you're gonna do?
Well, yeah, that's why I'm here. I'm here to convince you that I want to take your money and give it to other people. That's what I'm here for.
See? All
Okay.
right. Good job.
Yeah.
Good politician.
I am at a democratic function here, right? You guys are Democrats, right? So I'm asking though, like, what is the purpose of government? He
I
said
don't
protect
know.
the rights of
I
the
don't know.
people.
To me, it's
Is-
tyranny.
Is the purpose of the government, is the purpose of the government to make sure that the building codes are really good so you got to get permission from them to build on your property? Is that the purpose of government?
Defend the people.
Is the purpose of government to make sure that they're there to take, a fourth or a third of your paycheck? Is that what the purpose of
Keep
government?
you safe from COVID.
Oh, to keep you safe.
Right.
So what is the purpose of government? What's that?
Defend the people.
Defend the people. Now, that sounds really, really nice, right? But is that true? And I think you're right, because let's go to the Declaration of Independence. All right, I'm going to actually read part of it. This is our most founding document, right? Besides the Bible, which they derived their logic and rights and principles out of the Bible. When the Constitution talks about the common law, well, what is the common law? It is the Bible, the Magna Carta, and the Declaration of Independence. Right? That's what they reference back. So let's go to it. Let's go to this. So second paragraph, first of all, it talks about the laws of nature and nature's God, right? And then it goes into the second paragraph. It says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Okay, so man and woman are created by God, right? That they're created equal. They're given a life. They're given the same amount of time, in the day, and there's opportunities, but mostly. Then he says, and then he endows them equally with rights. What are these rights? They're listed. Among these, so there's some of them listed, are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Our founders very clearly tied the pursuit of happiness to property. To be able to control and own property. They said that in order for you to pursue happiness, you have to be able to own and control property. And it makes sense because can you imagine trying to live here on this earth and be free, but somebody else owns where you live? If somebody else owns it, then that means they could tell you what to do, how to do. They can even tell you whether you can worship that way or not that way, or what you can do. They can come in anytime you want, right? We'll talk about that a little bit more. But it says that God created us, that He gave us certain rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. So why are governments instituted? Remember, that was what we're at. What is the purpose of government? Why are they instituted? To secure the rights that God gave us. So they weren't. And who created government? Who instituted government? The people, right? In fact, it says in the next line, deriving their just powers, meaning government gets its powers, they're just powers from the consent of the governed. That would be us, right? We give our consent. Okay, so it's very clear. God created mankind, He gave them rights, and we created government to secure those rights. And the government is beholden to us. Right? Makes sense? And so that is the purpose of government. That is the reason why government is established. And so so now we don't have to be confused. And yet in Idaho in 2020, we have the government coming in and saying that, well, you can't worship. We're going to arrest you. Or you can't go to the park. We're going to arrest you. You can't trade with each other. We're going to arrest you. And so what has happened with the government in Idaho? What's happened?
They infringed on our liberty.
Yeah, they overstepped. They infringed upon our liberty. And what gave them that? It was done by police officers. And why did they think that they had justification to do that?
Because of Brad Little.
What's that?
Brad Little.
Yeah, because the governor issued an executive order and basically said that he had authority to force you to stay in your homes. It was a lockdown order, right? He had authority to say Idahoans must stay in their homes. And if they don't, then he commissioned the sheriff's office, the city police, the state police to arrest you. And then he also ordered the churches to close. He ordered the cessation of travel. And he also identified businesses that can stay open and others that had to close. Completely outside of his authority. He does not have that authority. And isn't that the opposite of freedom? No longer were we able to trade freely, right? We couldn't. We no longer were able to worship. No longer were we able to travel. Even to the point where we were ordered to stay in our homes. And so we have an issue here that needs to be resolved. Now, is this issue over now? Is the executive order all over and we're all out of the clear and we can move on?
Well, 15 days to...
What?
15 days?
It was 30 days.
That was 30 days.
So are we still under the executive order today?
Yeah.
He didn't lift the order?
No.
No. Do we realize that? So he's just being benevolent to us. He's just letting us do this meet and letting us go to church. He's letting us do these things, right? But at any time, he can ratchet it down. He says that this order is a rolling order, and he's going to keep it in place as long as he can. Right? So is everything okay? We go back to life, it's fine. Or do we need to be aware that he still has these orders in place? So also, anybody want to guess how much federal money Governor Little has received for COVID relief? $18 billion. That's right, so far. And who knows what he'll receive in the future. And why did he receive that money?
Because he followed the federal government.
Because that's right.
What to do with us.
In order to receive the money, he had to put the state in a state of emergency status. That was the first thing he had to do on March 13th. President Trump announced $50 billion for states that are in emergency. And so on March 13th, what did Brad Little do? He put the state of Idaho in emergency status. Well, how many COVID cases did we have? On his own website, he reports on March 13th that we have one unconfirmed COVID case. So did he do it for COVID? Why did he put the state of Idaho in emergency status? He did it so he could qualify for the federal funds. Then on March 25th, the same day that U.S. Congress decided that they were going to release $2 trillion March 25th, guess what? But the purpose was for states that were in extreme state of emergency. So what did Governor Little do on March 25th? He put the state of Idaho in extreme state of emergency. And he did a stay-at-home order and ordered you, each and me, Idahoans, to stay in our houses, right? And, remember the whole flatten the curve, and we only have to do it for 14 days, and, well, how well has that worked, right? Now, so did he do it because he was worried about COVID? How many COVID cases do we have on March? Unconfirmed COVID cases, because there was no confirmed cases back then. How many cases do you think were reported in Idaho on March 25th? 136 cases, unconfirmed cases. They couldn't confirm them. Well, we're a state of 1.8 million people, okay? And never have we ever been in any type of pandemic status ever through this 2020 and 2021. And he enacted martial law emergency orders that basically put all the branches of government under his control. Now, if you go to Executive Order 2020-07, that's where he says and pretty much admits what he's doing. He says in that order, so remember, I want you to do your homework when you go home. It's 2020, because I believe that's the year, that's how they do it, and it was the 7th order. So go home and look up, Governor Little order or Executive Order of Idaho 2020-07 and read it for yourself. Just don't take my word for it. But in essence, this is what it says. He says, on March 13th, I put the state in emergency status. On March 25th, I put it in extreme emergency status. And because of that, Congress is giving all this money to the office of the governor. And because we have all this COVID relief money, I'm going to put together a committee, and he says that I choose. And in the order, it says that serve at the pleasure of the governor. And then we decide where this money gets, how it's spent. Now, how is money supposed to be spent in Idaho? You're right. Who said that? The legislature, right? Money's supposed to be spent by the legislature. Do we know that? Like, that's the way the legislature keeps the government from growing and growing and growing. They limit their funds, right? That's what they do. But now we have a different form of government. The powers of the legislature have been taken up into the executive branch, into the office of the governor, and now the governor is spending the funds however he wants to, without any oversight from the legislature. And so that's the situation we find ourselves in Idaho right now. Go ahead.
Can I ask, just because you just said that, how do we know you won't do the same?
How do you know I won't do the same? You don't. You don't.
Great question.
I mean, you don't.
Great answer.
You don't know that I won't do the same. The only thing you can go off of is what I've done in the past.
I agree.
That's the only thing you could go off of. You have to look at what I've done. I think there's some really good scripture out there that says, by their fruits you shall know them. So you don't know, other than what I've done in the past. And I have...
Your record.
Yeah, my record. What is my history? And so you really don't. But my history does show that I am not in this for myself. And so I want to take now the rest of the time to answer your questions. I've presented to you a little bit about who I am, about where Idaho is, the situation. I've tried to be very factual with you so that I'm not, calling somebody names and all of that. I don't like what Brad Little did at all. I think he's a terrible governor. He's not his own, he's not controlling and making his own decisions. He's being a pawn. And I don't like it. And I see that if we continue down this path, that this is the very same path that Oregon went down. This is the very same path that Washington went down. They were all conservative states that were transferred into Republican states, if you will. Then there became some perversion of republicanism in that state that led them directly into a cesspool of liberalism that is destroying their country right now. We were right in the middle of being some perversion type of Republican state, right? That's where we're at, where they're not really Republican. They don't lower taxes. They don't minimize government. They don't protect the innocent that are being destroyed in the womb. They don't. These are all the things that they don't do, but they profess that they do, that the Republican platform says they do. And I am running on the Republican platform, but I am not part of the establishment. I refuse to be it, and I refuse to take even one dime from them, because I will not be beholden to them, and I will not use the system that is built that is some perversion of republicanism, because I want Idaho to remain Idaho, which is free to do whatever you want as long as you do not infringe upon your neighbors. That's what Idaho is. So with that, I'm going to open it up to questions. I'll answer any question you want, as long as it's not something personal between my wife and I. Now you'll notice when you come in, you didn't write your questions down, right? And then my staff wasn't back there like going through them to find the easy questions that I can answer. So I'm expecting you to answer the hard, or to ask the hard questions, right? Ask the hard questions. Go ahead.
This would be a good segue to talk about Lieutenant Governor Eaton on how she's in the same playbook as Governor Little by faxing her record, yet by theatrics wants to make executive orders when he's gone. So this would be a good segue to talk
So
about that.
you're asking about Lieutenant Governor.
Right?
Who's familiar with the Lieutenant Governor? Okay, about half of you in here. Her name is Janice McGeachin. McGeehan, actually, is how you say it. It spells McGeachin, but it's McGeehan, is how you say it. And as far as I know, I've met her a couple times. She seems like a pretty nice person to talk to. She's been in the House or in the government for 12 years now. As Lieutenant Governor, she's the President of the Senate. And I'm not very impressed with her record. She did not, when they proposed that they had to have IDs, actually confirm IDs for voting, she opposed that. She opposed open carry on campuses, which was surprising to me. She opposed that. And there's been some other things that she's done. But more than all of that, the thing that concerns me is that you have Brad Little and kind of the Republican establishment that either believe or want to use government to force you to do certain things that you may not want to do. Okay? Now, and then she is taking the position that she is on the other side, where she's going to use government to force the people to do what they are supposed to do. Do you see the problem there? So let's like a business, right? Let's take a business. You have a private business. You've worked hard. You built your business up. You took financial risk. You sacrificed your 16, 18 hours a day, which most business owners, have to do that, especially small business owners. And you built something up of value. And Brad Little, Governor Little, wants to come in and say that he can close your business, shut you down just by saying you're non-essential, right? Well, we have a problem with that. We don't believe that's the role of government. And he might come in. He'll come in and say, well, I'll get even more specific. Well, then he says, well, you can stay open, but you have to force your employees to wear masks, okay? Or you have to force your employees to get vaccinated, right? And you're like, wait a minute, this is my business. You didn't build this business up. You didn't take the financial risk. You didn't go and serve customers in your community. You didn't go and be part of the community. And now you want to control what's mine? That's Brad Little. Janice McGeehan is over here, and she's saying that she's going to force private businesses not to push vaccinations, not to push masks. You see the problem? You see the problem. Yeah, we might be more like, yeah, we don't want to have masks, right? We don't want to do these things, but you understand that that is not the role of government. And you have to be able to decipher that. Say, look, and how easy would it be for her to just say, well, I think this is what government should do. Just like Brad Little did.
It's tyranny either way.
It's tyranny either way, and that's my problem with her. Because what is the role of government? The role of government is supposed to step back and allow a willing buyer and a willing seller to trade with each other. And to protect that trade. You know, like not intervene, not profit off of it, you know, not get its share, not stop it, not restrict it, but to make sure that it can happen without another criminal coming in and coercing, manipulating, controlling, or stopping it. That's what government is supposed to do. And so you have Brad Little on this side, yeah, and some people, you know, might really like what he's doing. He's forcing businesses to force their customers, employees to wear masks, right? Then you got a lieutenant governor over here that she's proposing and putting task force together to force businesses not to do it. They're both wrong. It's not the role of government. And unless we're going to be free, we need to understand that just even though this tastes good, right, it's still not good. This tastes good to other people. The Democrats, the liberals love this, but it's not good, right? And there's no freedom in either one. Yeah.
If I can add the context, if others don't know, it's Lieutenant Governor Beecham is also running for governor. That's
Yeah.
why I posed my question. So you can understand that it's the same conservative ink. It's the same establishment. It's just political theater.
Thank you. Yeah, and she's been in the government for a long time, and so you know, you decide how you're going to decide, but understand the proper role of government. All right, what's another question? Right here.
Kind of speaking to that, I'm a member of the Idaho Army National Guard, so as the governor,
Thank
the
you.
governor is my direct boss, and the lieutenant governor has tried to utilize us in ways that were inappropriate. How would you use the National Guard in the state of Idaho?
So I'm going to restate your question just so everybody heard. So she's part of the National Guard, and the governor is the commander-in-chief, and we're grateful for that, right? That's a system that's very beneficial to the people. And the lieutenant governor, McGeechan, tried to enact or do some things to activate the National Guard, and it was inappropriate, and it was improper, and it was a political theater, and to me, it was very telling and very dangerous what she was trying to do, and it was all because of political theater. And again, the reason why one of the powers of the lieutenant governor is if the governor is unable to perform his duties as governor, then and why? Because the people may be in a direct need for defense, right? It may be imminent. And if the governor, he might have died, he might have been captured, he might have been, you know, whatever might be the case. So those are kind of the more extreme cases, or he might have lost his mind like Joe Biden, where he can't think straight, right?
Brandon. That's Brandon.
Brandon, yeah.
Let's go, Brandon.
That's right. Let's go, Brandon, right? So, and then we have our laws and our systems in place where the lieutenant governor is to basically immediately act in the defense and the security of the people, right? It's not about them. It's not about their power. It's about the unity of the state and the resources of the state to be able to use to defend the people's rights. That's what the National Guard is for. That's what the Guard is there for, right? And the governor is the commander-in-chief. And if the governor can't do that, then we need to have somebody else there quickly be able to be the commander-in-chief. And so our laws say that when the governor is not in the state or does not have the capacity to be able to lead the state, that the lieutenant governor can take that place. Well, every time the governor leaves now, Janice McGee again thinks that she can play political, I don't know what, roulette with those powers, and it's just inappropriate. It's something that we have to see through, right? We have to see through it. She's not doing the people any good, and by doing that, causing disruption, she believes that it's good for her. She's running for governor, and she thinks that the people of Idaho will go, oh, look, she's trying to fight Governor Little in what he's doing, but it's in an appropriate way, and it's dangerous, and it's just not what the people need, and it ultimately would do no good. She knows when she enacts those executive orders that they're just going to be, void in just a few hours, and so she's only doing it for herself. And I think it's disingenuous. I think it's dangerous, and I hope the people of Idaho see through it. And it's actually a waste of resources for the state, because now the governor and the lieutenant governor in a legal battle, right? The attorneys will spend hundreds of thousands of dollars of whose money? Yeah, fighting amongst each other, because the governor's trying to say, and rightfully so, the governor's trying to say, look, every time I leave town, you can't do this. So he's trying to legally stop her from doing that. And she's trying to say, well, I can do that or whatever. She's defending herself. And that's what's going on. And it's not what we need right now. We have a federal government that is so intrusive and so oppressive that if the state doesn't play its role in defending the people, we may not even have the ability to defend ourselves. And we got the governor and the lieutenant governor playing politics. To me, it's not what should be done. So, did I answer your question, or was it a specific part of that you wanted to hear from me?
No, I think I just wanted your opinion and feedback on it.
Yeah, I wouldn't play in that world at all.
Do you have a recommendation for your lieutenant governor, if you're governor?
Well, the only thing I could say is, looking at those who have run, I definitely not Scott Bedke. He is part of the problem. He is as establishment can be, and I won't go into detail. I think Priscilla Giddings is probably by far the best choice that's out there right now.
What's the question?
Who would I recommend right now as lieutenant governor? So anyway, there's some time. So right here and then right here. Go ahead.
Pointing me.
Yes.
So, I'm really more interested in what you've developed in the way of context, purpose, and the results you expect to produce for Idaho.
Okay. So the results that I expect to produce in Idaho. So it goes down to the proper purpose of government, and that is to secure the liberties of the people. So I believe that is what a governor is there for. I believe that is what the state and its resources are there for, and that is what needs to happen. Now, where's the threats? We talked about some of those. But the power is mostly held right now in the bureaucracies of the executive branch. So the Department of Health, right? They issued an order that you'd lock down. The governor signed it and all of that. And then you have the Department of Education, the Department of the Child Protection Services, and I could go on, Department of this, Department of that. And it's the same with the federal agencies. It's the federal agencies in the executive branch that are coming down on the people and taking their freedom away, right? And that's the same with Idaho. And the power is being held in the executive agencies, the bureaucracies. Now, who are the bureaucrats? They're the full-time government employees. Now, we don't need to completely make an enemy out of them, right? But they are the bureaucrats. And their agencies keep growing and growing and growing. And in order to justify that growth, they have to be funded. And in order to justify the funding, they have to come down upon the people to justify it more and more. Right? So that is where the threat to our liberties resides, in the executive branch of government, the bureaucracies. And so who, in theory anyway, is supposed to control and to control the executive branch, the executive bureaucracies? The governor, right? So in theory, the governor is supposed to go in there, and he's supposed to be elected by the people. He's supposed to be a governor of the people, right? And he's supposed to go in there and make sure that these executive branches of these bureaucracies are not, infringing upon the people's rights. And if they are, he's supposed to stop that. He's supposed to clean them up. He's supposed to make them smaller or eliminate them if we don't need them. He's supposed to run a tight ship. He's the CEO of the state of Idaho, or whatever state, right? And so, but what we're having right now, because we have an establishment problem, they're the ones controlling the governor. And they've usurped the power from the legislature. And they're the ones that decide how much taxes and all that comes in and how it's being spent. And it's a problem because it is the direct threat that is upon us. So as governor, I intend on cleaning up the bureaucracies, minimizing their size, eliminating the ones that need to be eliminated. And I could spend 4 years or 8 years in the office of governor and never even work with the legislature on a bill. Just stripping the powers and working to minimize and get the bureaucracies where they need to be. I could do that for 4 to 8 years, never work on one bill, and do the people of Idaho a tremendous amount of good. Tremendous amount of good. So that's partly what I'll do. That's a lot of what I will do. All right here.
Well, oftentimes, unfortunately, in our politics in this country, the states tend to mirror, what's going on the national level. So there's been, especially for those of us that, we're old enough, our kids weren't necessarily, but 9/11 was the biggest slide that we had with the erosion of personal liberties and everything. And more power has been coalesced in the executive branch of government in both state and the national level since that time. When you're facing it on a state level, you're going to face the same thing that they're facing on the national level. The legislature is not acting in capacity constitutionally authorized to do the things it should be doing. They should be, scrutinizing every law that is going to be passed, whether it passes constitutional muster. So are you willing to, as governor, to stand, against any laws that come out of the legislature as the executive branch in its proper role and say we will not enforce an unconstitutional law?
Yeah, absolutely. So, question is well, I'm not going to try to rephrase your question. Basically, that the legislature's responsibility is to control the government. And I know I'm not giving your question justice. So, and then the question was ultimately asked, am I going to, well, one is any bill that comes to my desk that is not constitutional, that is not beneficial to the people, will be vetoed. But then the executive branch of government is, again, to put forth the law. And if there is something in the past, which there are many things in the past that have already become a bill and statute in the Idaho Code, then it'd be my duty to say, look, that is not constitutional. I will not use the energy and effort of the executive branch to put that forth, right? And those are the things and we need that. We have to have that. Because what does it translate to? It translates to freedom for the people. And now as a little bit of a segue on what you said, you talked about the comparison of the federal executive agencies and the state. and how closely they mirror each other. Well, what is the purpose? Why are they mirroring each other? Why isn't the state? Why does the state look just like the feds? Why can't you see where the federal government ends and the state begins? Should be a clear line. Why? Anybody have an understanding of why?
Because the government's too big.
Well, it definitely is too big.
Federal tax free.
10th Amendment.
Federal funding.
Okay, that's right. Federal funding. So what happens right now, and it's a huge problem in Idaho and across the country, actually across the world. But right now, we have like the Department of Education that's contracting with the federal government in order to receive billions of dollars. Right? And the federal government doesn't give any money unless what?
Meet the requirements.
Yeah, they are strings attached. They have to be strings attached to. And those strings are that basically that you will comply, that you will be obedient, in the sense that you will follow our guidelines, our curriculums, and then that's how you get money. Well, now we've got like our little sheriff departments are receiving federal money, and they're signing memorandums of understanding, MOUs, and then you sit there and wonder, why doesn't the sheriff listen to the people? Well, he contracted to do the things that the federal government tells him to do. What about our school boards? School boards do the same thing, right? And you're sitting there going, why are they pushing this garbage in our schools? It's because they agreed to push the garbage in the schools. They signed a contract, and they received millions of dollars, or it might even be only a couple $100,000. But they received money. And it's happening in our businesses, our hospitals, our county offices, our city offices, and our state, all over. And they're completely controlling the people, well, their representative, quote unquote, representative government. They're completely controlling it with federal funds. And those federal funds come with memorandums of understandings, which are a contract. So what happens if the city who received $2 million from the federal government and agrees to push, the global sustainable agenda, right? When it comes to the building and development and all of that. What happens if they decide that they're not going to comply to that? The people are like, what in the world are you putting, the spotted owl priority over, let's say, the people and their private property? And you guys are going, what in the world is going on here, right? Why are you doing this? And you put enough pressure on them that the city then goes with what the people says. What does the federal government do?
Take the money back.
No, they don't take the money back. They bring them up in the federal court, the city, right? They bring them up in federal court, and they show that they violated the contract that they received for money. And the federal court, because now they're party, right? All cases that are where the federal government is party goes to the federal court. And then the judge rules that the city violated the federal law and issues a requirement for the city to start following the contract that they signed in order to receive the money. And then guess what the city does? They get all scared. Most of the time it doesn't even go to the court, right? Because they're scared that it's going to go to the court and they're going to somehow be culpable, and so they never cross the federal government. And what does that do for the people? Well, it does. We're sitting there frustrated. Why are these people doing this? Why is critical race theory? Why this? Why that? Right? Why are they pushing this agenda? And you're thinking that all the school board or the city council, you think they're all a bunch of crazy liberals. And what did they do? Years prior, they signed a contract that they would comply. Do you see how it ruins our Republican form of government, our representative government? It ruins it. It destroys it. And so it is very, very important that we get control of this. Well, and what I mean by that is the state starts to block this. Starts to, use its flex its muscles to say, look, you're not going to come in. And also to the school boards and to the all the publicly funded entities, you're not to contract with the federal government. Think about that. Think about how much of a violation of jurisdiction it is for a school district in a little community to be contracting with Washington, D.C., the federal government. Think about that. It's a complete violation. And it's what our founders saw this happen because they lived it before, right? They watched what happened and how the British government did this very same thing. And they knew that if the federal government was able to come in and control the resources of the state and pull money and wealth out, then trickle it down, they said that would cause the states and the people to be put into undue obedience. And is that not exactly where we find ourselves? On every level, even your little community here. Oh, if you dig, you don't have to dig very far. You'll find that they receive federal money. And maybe not, and if not, man, it'd be amazing. Right? But that they receive federal money. Why? Because the federal government's actually soliciting to them. Hey, if you'll do this, we'll send you $1.5 million and you could, improve your roads or whatever. And they think, oh, that'd be so great. And then they sign it, and now they're beholden to it. We have to stop that. It's a huge problem. And it's why you can't see where the federal government ends and the states begin, or even the counties, or even the cities. It all seems like it's one big mess, and it is. It is one big mess, and it has to be cleaned up. And the state needs to clean it up, and it needs a leader who will actually do it. Right here.
If we do stop that, how long do you think it would take for those existing contracts to run out, or would it be out of it altogether?
So that's a great question. So the question, or I guess my response is would we be justified in nullifying the contracts? Okay? And I think in many cases, yeah, because there is no constitutional authority for the federal government to contract with states, with cities, counties, and private entities. There is no authority in the Constitution. And what does the 10th Amendment say? Right? The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Right? So if it's not authorized in this document, that the federal government does not have authority to do it. And we argue, that's our position. And again, it's not, some family fighting the federal government. It's the state of Idaho. And that's the way it was supposed to be. Yeah.
Okay, so the next question is the judicial branch, then we have to start appointing judges that will stand and bend the constitutional principles, so it prevents that. That's where the court's been awry on the national level, using the Commerce Clause and a variety of other things to claim further authority over every matter beyond just conflict between the states, which was the original intention.
Yeah. So we're talking about the judges, the judicial branch. There's some pretty significant problems. And as governor, I wouldn't be in the judicial branch, but what influences does the governor have to get the judicial branch in control? Well, first of all, the prosecutors are under the executive branch, right? So if you get them doing the right things, you get the state attorneys doing the right things, stop bringing these cases that, are the state of Idaho against, Roger so-and-so, and there's no victim, there's no damages that anybody has done. They just say or claim that so-and-so did that. Those things, basically, the governor does have a lot of influence of. And then let's say that the prosecutors do continue to do that because what they do claim, and Trump went through a lot of this, President Trump went through a lot of this, they claim that, oh, when President Trump is trying to influence the prosecutors because he's their boss, right? Department of Justice, the United States Department of Justice is an executive branch of government. It is not a judicial. It's an executive. It's in the executive branch. FBI is in the executive branch. You know, so President Trump was their boss. And when he comes down and says, hey, we're going to start doing things a little different, you know what they claimed? All the lawyers got together and said, well, he's obstructing justice. No, he's not obstructing justice. He's doing his job. And so that's what they would claim, and that's the battle that I foresee as a governor. But then again, so that battle's going on. Well, guess what you do on the back end? If they start prosecuting people for going to the park and they get them convicted, well, guess what I'm doing on the back end? I'm going to have a pen on my desk, and it's going to be a red pen, and it's going to say pardoned. Right? Because that's the power a governor has, and that's how our founders, that's the wisdom of our founders. So guess what? If you start pardoning people that are wrongfully prosecuted for political purposes, and you can't stop it on the front end, well, we have mechanisms to stop it on the back end. And they'll start going, well, there's no reason to do it anymore because he'll just pardon them. And that is, again, a way that a governor can protect the people. And believe me, it's a needed protection. My family went through hell because of that. Literal hell. Right? Actually, hang on. She had her hand up, then we're going to go here and then right here.
I just want to know what is your stand on vaccine mandates. It's happening already, and we as healthcare workers are suffering because of these. So we want to know what's your plan.
Yeah, so her question was about vaccine mandates. I did touch on it a little bit earlier, but not in detail. So first of all, who has jurisdiction over your body?
I do.
As governor, I'm going to try to take jurisdiction over your body. So, yeah, who has jurisdiction over your body?
Me, Dr. Fauci.
He thinks he does. No, he really does. He really believes that he has jurisdiction. Well, if he doesn't, he really wants you to believe that he has jurisdiction over your body. Again, God gave us our body, and he gave us our liberty, and he gave us jurisdiction over our lives, including and especially our body. It's where our spirit resides. It's one of the most precious gifts that he has given us. And it is ours to decide what we are going to put in it, what we're going to do with it, when we're going to wake up, what we're going to put our effort in, our energy in, our labor, who we're going to spend that time with, where we're going to spend that time. It's ours to decide that. And we never, ever, in any document from the people to the government, give them jurisdiction over our bodies. Never. So, just to make that really clear. So now, let's talk about vaccine mandates. So we obviously, the government has no jurisdiction to force a vaccination or anything into our body. Okay, we understand that. Now let's go to these hospitals. Let's talk about these hospitals. They're claiming they're private businesses. That's what they're claiming. Yet they receive hundreds of millions of dollars of public funds. So again, and where does most of that come from? The federal government. We just talked about that. And those hospitals signed a memorandum of understanding that when the federal government tells them to do something, they'll do it, including forcing vaccinations upon their employees. Okay, so that's a problem. So as governor, as I had mentioned in great detail, I will fight that battle to stop that flow of money coming into the state of Idaho, because they don't have authority to contract with the people. And to be honest with you, distributing funds that way is not within their authority either. So now we also, within the state, if they're receiving state funds, those funds, if they're going to use it to try to force vaccinations upon their employees, well, they'll be cut off, right? I will not allow the funds of the state of Idaho to go into the hands of anybody who's going to try to take jurisdiction over somebody else's body. So there's that. But then, most effective, more than any other thing that we've ever seen in history, and it's happened over and over again, is the relationship between the employer and the employee. What do the employers have to have? Skilled labor, right? They have to have skilled labor or they go out of business. They have to have employees that can actually work and produce. And what have we done in the past in this country and others, but particularly we have a great history of it, when working conditions were not very good or we wanted to improve working conditions? What have we done? We've united together, right? And we said, look, we are not going to give our labor to you if you're going to try to give us these conditions. And that has always been the most effective thing in correcting the employers when it comes to some type of unacceptable working condition. And we need to use that. We need to unite together. And we need to stand behind those that do unite together. And so, St. Al and St. Luke's is the largest hospital chains, if you will, in Idaho. And they were going to push the vaccine mandate and say that they were going to fire everybody. I believe it was September 1st. And if I'm wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure it was September 1st. And the reason I remember, because that's my birthday. So, but they didn't. Why didn't they? Well, yeah, enough people, about 20%, a little over 20% of their employees said that they would rather lose their job than to take the vaccination, right? And so they said, well, look, we can't afford to make the cutoff on September 1st, so we're going to push it off. Now, this is a crazy thing. What does Governor Little did? He said that he would enact part of the National Guard to come into the hospitals to make up for when that 20% is no longer there. Do you see how he's interrupting? What's that?
We don't even have that many medical people.
See, she's in the Guard, and she says we don't have that many medical people. So but that's what he was saying. And you see how now again he's interrupting and disrupting the relationship between an employer-employee from working that out, just like the federal money did. Now putting people in that place and sustaining the hospitals in their actions, you see what it does to the people. It takes their voice away. It takes their power away. And we need a governor who doesn't do that. We need a governor who empowers the people. We need a governor who understands the jurisdictions. We need a governor who knows what works and has worked. And so that Idaho can prosper. So that Idaho can thrive. So that Idaho can be free. And also so that Idaho can be an example to the rest of the world of how to live. How to live. So thank you for that question. Yeah.
I have another question.
Go for it.
We already covered this. This is my question about people from Afghanistan.
Okay.
And I believe that each state has to receive, I don't know how many people. So I do have concerns about it because I don't know are they doing backgrounds on them? Are they coming and who is gonna pay for housing, food, all that stuff? Our taxes are gonna be going up because of this? This is a big concern for everybody.
Don't worry, Joe Biden says it'll be okay. Okay.
That's not Joe Biden, that's Joe Biden.
Oh, Biden, yeah. Yeah, oh, Biden. Yeah, oh, Biden. okay, so she's concerned about, you know, I don't even know if we would call them immigrants. They are immigrants, but like she's concerned about that, right? And as many of us are. So why are we being forced to take those people?
Change it to a new state.
Well, that might be the overall, goal, but why are we being forced to take them?
Is it a prior contract?
That's exactly right. Who said that? Raise your hand. That's exactly right. We took federal funds and we agreed to it long ago. And we spent those funds and we enjoyed those funds and we built parks with them and we built our roads and, they built a new, new government building and they did all these things and it came from the federal government. We were really happy about it then. But now we have to pay the piper. And one of those payments are that we would take in, immigrants from whatever, in whatever circumstance the federal government tells us. And we don't trust the administration, the president of the United States, if you want to call him that. We don't trust that. But guess what? We already took the money. So you see the problem here. And unless we breach a contract, which maybe we need to, maybe it's worth it. Unless we breach a contract, we're stuck. And the same with the cities and same with the counties and so on and so forth. So now, I do want to, while I have the opportunity, and I know that there was some other hands, I haven't forgot about you over here, but I want to lay out a couple things because there are three I'm going to categorize because it's pretty much going to be put into three different groups of immigrants that come into any area. And I might be talking about those from Oregon coming here or California coming here, Washington or others, or I might be talking about coming out from outside the country. There's three types. There's those that come for opportunity or for a handout. They come because they want something. They don't want to work for it, but they want a handout. Okay. There's also those that are coming because they see an opportunity for crime, criminal opportunity. They see a weak justice system, a weak penal system. They can get away with certain things. For example, look what's happening in Portland. A criminal can go in there into a business and take, as long as they take less than $900 worth of stuff, they can leave there and the police won't even do anything about it. That's what's happening right now. It has to be over $900 before the police. Why? Because crime is so rampant there that the police can't handle it. Why? Because they didn't do it, they didn't put their foot down, and they didn't truly, they were more worried about prosecuting somebody for calling somebody a name. For one race calling somebody else a race, they decided they were going to prosecute for that, spend all their energy on that. Meanwhile, the businesses have to pretty much fend for themselves. And to the point now where crime, because what do? When you don't take care of and suppress crime properly, justly, you invite criminals, right? And so that's the solution to not bringing those who are here for criminal opportunity. Now, the third group of people that immigrate are those who want freedom. They want liberty. They're willing to work for it. They don't want a handout. They're willing to come and work for opportunity. And we need to understand the difference between someone who's coming here for a handout, coming here for criminal opportunity, and those who are coming here for opportunity and prosperity, but they're willing to work for it, for freedom. We have to understand there's a difference. And we shouldn't lump them all up into one group and say, oh, they're all bad. Because almost everyone in here, I'd probably argue every person in here has ancestors that immigrated to this country looking for opportunity, but they were willing to work for it. So we need to understand the difference. And they might be coming from Oregon, Right now, they might be coming from Oregon, Washington, California, Nevada, New Mexico, Colorado, all around, because they see Idaho as a place of freedom, as a place of refuge where they can still worship, they can still trade, they can still travel. They can move about, they can leave their homes without a man-made filter over their face. So they're coming here, and we need to understand the difference. How do you stop people who are coming here for a handout? You don't offer the handout. Something I will do as governor. Imagine the state of Idaho not offering handouts. Go to Oregon if you want. If you want, welfare, go to Oregon. Go to Washington. See how it works over there. If you're looking for criminal opportunity, don't come to Idaho. Because if you infringe upon your neighbor's right, which is not freedom, we're going to catch you. We're going to require you to restore the damages. And we're going to be strict about it. And then those who want to come here for opportunity and want to work for it, well, guess what? We need you. We want you. That's what we built this country upon. That's who we are. Welcome to Idaho. Come here and help us keep Idaho, Idaho. So it's very clear to me in my mind. And don't mix them up. Understand very clearly what it is. And so now I know there was a question back here, right here, right in the very back, and then right here. You got to speak up, Bob. All right, what time is it? We got a few minutes, not much. So, 63% of our land mass in Idaho, our land in Idaho, is being controlled by the federal government. And it's a huge problem that most people have kind of got used to. And so to try to summarize it just a little bit, what effects does that have upon Idaho? Well, first of all, your wealth, the wealth of the people's wealth, anything the state uses for its purposes comes from that, right? And the land and the resources are true wealth. I'll give you an example. Let's say I've got an apple orchard. I've got 240 apple trees. Well, actually and then I've got another 135 variety of different trees, okay? Well, I can take one apple seed, plant it in the ground, get it in the right condition, and it'll grow up and eventually give me hundreds and hundreds of apples every year. That's called the increase of the earth. And I could sell those apples, right? And that's where wealth comes from. We think wealth might come from going to our job and we get a paycheck. That's not necessarily. It's always tied back to the increase of the earth. And that is God-given. God gave us that. He's given us a great way for us to live and produce and to trade. And it's done by the increase of the earth. Okay? But in order to do that, you have to have what? You have to have land. You have to have water. You have to have other resources. There's nothing that we benefit today. This chair was made from taking minerals from the earth, resources from the earth. You know, this jacket, everything, this building, everything came from the earth. Right? Everything. So when you stop the people from being able to access the land and the natural resources, you stop the ability for the people to thrive and even live. Well, in Idaho, 63% of the land and 72% of the subsurface mineral rights are being stopped from us using by the federal government. And it's a huge problem, not only because it inhibits our ability to prosper and for the people of Idaho to even pay their bills, but it also does some other things that I want to point out. One is it's causing the affordable housing crisis that we're experiencing right now, where our children coming out of the homes, they can't even think about having a home right now. The only way you can get a home right now in Idaho is if you brought money from outside of Idaho. And that's not okay. That's not okay. We have to have homes to live in. And if we were able to spread out on this land that's being controlled, right? And I'm going to give you a little figure because, we love our hunting, hiking, fishing. And we should preserve a good portion of this for that, right? Including multiple use purposes so that we graze it, log it, mine it, all of that, right? Right along with our hunting, hiking, fishing, right? But then you say, well, is there enough left? I'm talking about 32 million acres in Idaho that's being controlled by the federal government. There's more than enough to spread out and still preserve the things that we love and also the resources that we would call multiple use purposes, right? There's plenty. And if we could do that, well, now all of a sudden, now housing would drop. What about if we were able to log our forests rather than burn them? Well, all of a sudden we got lots of material being milled in Idaho. What if we were able to get the government out of the way so that we could actually use our own materials after we cut it rather than having to sell it to other states and then we ship material in for our houses? Let's get them out of the way, right? So affordable housing crisis. 2, we have a problem where our agricultural land is being built upon from houses, right? Well, it makes sense. That's the only thing that's available. Well, we're losing hundreds of thousands of agricultural land. We do have the figures, but I need to get them in my head a little bit better. But hundreds of thousands of acres are being transferred into housing. And you can't get that land back. I mean, you're putting pipes in it, you're putting gravel in it, you're making it unlevel. I mean, can you imagine? And there's no reason for that. What's the number one industry in Idaho? What's our number one economy? It's agriculture. And we're destroying our number one economy because we're not building out, we're building on our agricultural land. Why? Because we're landlocked, because the federal government's locking our land up, not allowing us to use it, saying it belongs to them, which it doesn't. And then third, in our cities, especially our big cities, and everybody's concerned about Boise, and they should be, it's becoming more and more densely populated. They're building up rather than building out. And when you build up, high-rise apartments, congestion, traffic, smog, you completely lose connection with the land. Completely lose it. And all of a sudden now, you think that milk is made in the back room of Albertsons. Right? They have no idea how much work, how much increase of the earth goes on to give you an awesome gallon of milk. No idea. They have no idea what eggs and bread and everything comes from. They lose that connection. They just think it goes to the grocery store. And so they start voting that way. Right? And all of a sudden, your rural areas don't mean anything anymore. In fact, they subscribe to this extreme environmentalist religious ideas, and they actually try to stop people from using the land and the resources because they're balancing the species, right? And then you end up with a place like we're on the verge of happening right now in Idaho, where you have a situation that I call the Hunger Games syndrome, where you have the capital city, right? And they're all there and they're having their little art things and their little games and all of that, dressing up like they're gay and all these weird clothes and putting makeup on men's face and all of that, right? You have that downtown Boise. And you got all the other rural areas, the districts, just funding them, sending their resources, working for them, and they're politically controlling everybody else. Let's look at Oregon. That's what Portland has become. That's what Seattle and Washington has become. Las Vegas in Nevada has become. Colorado City in Colorado, or Denver in Colorado has become. I could go on, right? That's what it's become. And it is caused primarily because the federal government is controlling the land and resources and pushing people into the cities. Okay? So you can see that if we are going to preserve our conservative identity in Idaho, we have to take back our lands. We have to. Oh, that's a good question. Who answered that? Or who asked that?
Can't remember.
Okay, so let me give you a little bit of, I'm gonna give you a little bit of it's gonna be a very simple answer, right? But I also want to lead on. My family generationally has fought this battle. Like, some people might be, loggers generational. Others might be, farmers. Some might be race car drivers, right? And it kind of becomes in their blood, right? And yes, my family is a ranching family, but for generations, we have had to fight the federal government over these land issues. And guess what? I stand here today as a miracle, but we have won over and over and over again. So I say that because I want to answer your question, but I want you to have a little confidence that I have some authority behind what I'm saying. But it is actually very simple. Now, when you look at a map and you look at Idaho, you'll see these little green pockets typically of private property, right? And they're the green because they're the mostly typically the most green area, and you look right on the other side, like you see it, and it's usually in a little valley or something. And then there's like this line, and right outside of it is federally controlled. You notice I don't say BLM land, Forest Service land, because it's not. It's federally controlled, and we need to stop saying it's BLM or Forest Service. It's not. So why is this area private and over here federally controlled? Anybody?
Big money.
Well, no. No.
Nobody claimed it.
That's right.
It was homesteaded.
All of it was available at one time. It was all available. Prior statehood, even after statehood, is all available to come out and claim it. But the areas where there was water and where you can make a living were the ones that was the area that was claimed. And the other, because the West is pretty arid, it wasn't claimed, right? Or maybe they were using it a different way. They started grazing it or logging it or mining it, right? But they didn't claim the real estate. But over here, the real estate was claimed. It actually was titled. Okay? And so that is the only difference, that people came out and claimed it. And then it was appropriated to them, and they titled it. And then they go record the title into the county recorder's office, and it becomes private property. Well, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and I'm talking 1960s, 70s, and 80s, the federal government looked over the land in the West and said, look, no one has claimed all of this land. And they began to claim it. And how did they claim it? They couldn't appropriate, they couldn't take title to it because it's illegal for them to do it. Even back then, the states and the Constitution didn't authorize it. So what did they do? They began to put their signs on it, say this is Forest Service, this is National Forest this, National Forest that. They began to map it, and so every map you look at, it says Forest Service or BLM or Park Service or whatever. They began to claim it, and now generationally we've pretty much accepted that that's what it is. But if you go down to the county recorder, if you look at the map, the entire county is sectioned off into sections, right? Well, why would the county be sectioning off federal land, right? They don't have any jurisdiction. Yeah, they do. It's the other way around. But now you go, let's say there's a section of land in the county that's on federally controlled land. There's no private. You go down there and you say, okay, county recorder, I want you to show me the title to that land. What's going to happen? There is no title. It's unappropriated. It hasn't been appropriated. What's that?
It's our land.
It's unappropriated, right?
It's all our land.
Yes, it is. So what is you ask the question, how are we going to do it? The state and the county has power to appropriate. We're going to appropriate this land. We're going to create mechanisms of disposal like they've always done in the past. It is well within the power of the state and the counties to appropriate land. And we're going to use that. And yeah, is it going to be a battle? You better believe it's going to be a battle. But guess who's going to be fighting that battle? It's not going to be a little ranching family in the middle of the desert against the federal government. That's a pretty tough battle. It's not going to be that. It's going to be the state of Idaho fighting that battle the way it should have been. Saying, look, you don't have constitutional authority to be controlling these lands. And we are going to appropriate it. We have the power to appropriate it, and we are going to appropriate it. And we will appropriate a large amount of that area for multiple use purposes like I talked about. And then these other lands will become available through some type of mechanism of disposal. And that's what I'm proposing. And it is that simple. So now, kind of the final question, Bob, and I've touched on this. Am I going to compromise? Am I willing to fight this battle? And for those of you who may know that my family was thrown into federal prison over this issue, and we spent 2 years in federal prison. And half of that time, I was in solitary confinement. I was in solitary confinement for right around a year. Never once was I able to ever have any physical contact with my wife or children. Not one time. And the circumstances were terrible and very abusive, because they tried to break us down to take a plea deal. Because they knew they had no just case, right? Well, anyhow, we didn't compromise. My family didn't compromise. We suffered through that and beat them twice in federal courts through 2 major trials. They spent $100 million prosecuting my family, and we beat them in their own court. And I'm here today to testify to you that I am not someone who's going to compromise. I am not. And I pray that if I am elected as governor, that I will not lose my soul, that I will not compromise, that I will stand for the people. And I don't plan on being in there forever, 4 to 8 years. Get the job done and get out. I'm not a politician. And I will build confidence in you that this campaign and what we are doing is starting to take flight. It is starting to really get movement. Including down in the cities. And many of I don't know if you've seen the polls or you care about the polls, but what they're showing is something that we believed would happen if we did our job right. And that is we would take the lead in the polls, because people would start to understand where we're at in Idaho, who we are in Idaho, and what we need to do. And I hope to be a servant to the people, and I hope to be that person that you can trust in the position of governor to be able to implement these things. And I want to thank you for your time. and give a little bit of time to Wendy here. And just grateful for, and I know I didn't get through all your questions, so come and ask me. We're getting pretty long here, and we got to cut off at some point. So please come and talk to me, and I'll try to answer those questions that didn't get answered. And thank you again for your time, Wendy. Thank you.